Welcome again to Fruits of the Orchard, Parshat Beha'alotcha. So in Fruits of the Orchard, there are many different insights. We're going to be picking three for this session tonight. And we're starting, for those who have the book, on page 378 with the insight or the article called Changing the Negative. So here, I'm going to read in English. For those who want to follow in a Chumash, it's Bamidbar 8, verses 1 through 3. So this is actually in the beginning of the Parsha. The Parsha of Beha'alotcha is full of different incidences. It's one of the Torah portions that has so many different things happening in it. It begins with the instruction of Aaron to light the menorah. So it begins like this. God spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you light the lamps, the 7 lamps shall cast their light towards the face of the menorah." Meaning the face of the menorah is the middle light. And the 3 on each side, the light in a sense is directed towards the middle one. Aaron did so. Aaron did as he was commanded. He lit the lamps towards the face of the menorah as God had commanded Moses. So on the words, Aaron did so, Rashi says, Shelo Shina. He didn't change any of the details that God had instructed him to light the menorah. Shelo Shina. So this is a classic Rashi. We know that in many, many, many cases, Rashi is very brief. He only says what he feels he has to say. So here he gives an explanation in 2 words. Shelo Shina. He didn't change anything. So I remember that many years Reb Shlomo was here on the Moshav for this Parsha. And I remember that he would talk the entire Shabbos about these 2 words, Shelo Shina. And of course, he would take from scores of different Hasidic Rebbes who were commenting on why does Rashi say, in other words, what's called the Havamina. Why would we think that Aaron wouldn't do exactly like God said? What's the chiddush of Rashi? What's the novelty of Rashi that he has to tell us that he didn't change? The text says he did so. So why would we think differently? So I remember this, that Reb Shlomo, like the whole Shabbos, would come up with explanation after explanation. So, and most of it was based on the idea of something that we've discussed before, what's called our first nature and our second nature. That everyone has certain things about them that the whole world wants to change, and we shouldn't. It's who we are. On the other hand, if we just stick with our nature and nurture, and we make no attempt to improve ourselves, to rectify ourselves, to purify ourselves, then we're not, in a sense, a whole being. We're stuck in our first nature. So both of these are true. There's certain things that I remember Reb Shlomo used to say, because he helped send hundreds and hundreds of young people to yeshiva and seminaries. hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. But he would always say, don't let them clip your wings. Don't let them clip your wings. Meaning, let's say someone has a talent for music. Someone has a talent for art. Someone has a talent for landscaping. Someone has a talent for cooking, whatever. And what he was warning people was, don't get in a situation that you're going to be put in a box. And all of a sudden you're going to say to yourself, well, learning Torah is the most important thing. I'm going to have to drop music. I have to drop art. I have to drop my talents. I have to drop my hobbies, my interests. And all I do is learn Torah. Now, obviously, learning Torah is like super important. But Reb Shlomo was trying to say, lo shina. There's certain things that not only shouldn't you change, but you have to develop them. And then there are other things that we have inbred qualities that are not so positive. We all have those tendencies of a whole list of possible negative personality traits, and that we should change them. We should. So the Rebbe from Alexander said something about shelo shina, but he read it with a comma. Shelo, comma, shina. In other words, we have to understand that Aaron, in the dedication of the tabernacle, he was very unsure of himself. And Moshe had to, in a sense, hold his hand and assure him that Aaron's part in the golden calf had not disqualified him from being the high priest. Aaron felt, even though he fell into it very innocently, he meant well, but he ended up helping to facilitate the making of the golden calf, not on purpose. But he felt very, very deeply his complicity in the whole making of the golden calf. And Moshe told him, because you feel so responsible, that's exactly why God has chosen you. None of us are perfect, but because you care so much, that's why God chose you. So the Rebbe from Alexander said, it's about Aaron, but it's really just in general. So he read it, not that he didn't change any of the details that God gave him, but he changed the low, the negative voice that we all have in ourselves that tell us we can't do it, we can't accomplish what we want to accomplish. We're not worthy. We don't merit it. Who am I to do X, Y, and Z? So shelo shina, that he took the low and he changed it to the positive, and he fell right into line of doing exactly what God had commanded him, and took on the responsibility of being the high priest. So this reminds me of a story I might have told you before, but it's a good time to tell it again, is when the Alter Rebbe first came to the Maggid of Mezrich. He was very young, he was a genius. He had mastered the entire Talmud, but he went to Mezrich because he wanted to learn how to pray. He didn't feel that he really understood what prayer was about. So he came to the Maggid of Mezrich. The Maggid of Mezrich is the one who followed the Baal Shem Tov after he passed away. He was the leader of the Hasidic movement, which was very young at that point. It was in its first generations. And he was there for a few months, and he was very drawn to Hasidus, but there were things that he wasn't so sure about. He was like going back and forth. And so the Maggid asked him to come in, and he quoted a verse to him. Eish tamid tukad al mizbeach lo tichbeh. An everlasting fire you should have on the altar, don't put it out. And so he said to the altar Rebbe, you say it now. So the altar Rebbe said it, and he said again. He said it again. He had him say it 10 times, and he explained to him that the way it's usually read is the way I just translated it. An everlasting fire should burn on the altar, comma, don't put it out. The Maggid read it by putting the comma, just like the Rebbe of Alexander, one word over. And he read it, Eish tamid tukala ala mizbeach, an everlasting fire should burn in the altar. The lo, the no, the voice in your head that's saying, this is not for me. I can't do it. I don't understand. I won't accomplish it. Tichbeh, put that voice out. And of course, the altar Rebbe stayed and became one of the top students of the Maggid, and then went on to start the entire Chabad movement. So that is alluded to in this Rashi. Shelo Shina. You could read it in the positive, that he did exactly what God commanded him. He was in perfect sync with God's will. And you could read it the opposite, that he did change. He changed by changing the no into yes. Okay, so that's the first insight for tonight. The second one is on page 378, and this is called The Secret of the 70 Lamps. So in the book of Malachim, of Kings, and again in Divrei HaYamim, the book of Chronicles, it mentions that Shlomo HaMelech, when he built the temple, he put a menorah, but he put 10 other menorahs along with the menorah that was in the tabernacle. And everyone asked, why did Shlomo do this? On what basis did he do this? So in Bamidbar 8:4, Numbers 8:4, it says the following. This was the form of the menorah, hammered work of gold. From its base to its flower, it was hammered work. According to the form that God had shown Moshe, so did he construct the menorah. So in Hebrew, the Hebrew for so did he construct, ken asa. Ken asa. So the word ken, which means yes in Hebrew, so he did construct. Asa means he made, he constructed. The word ken equals 70. Ken asa. Here it says make a menorah, but then it says kain asa. The word asa, its numerical value equals 375, equals Shlomo. Shlomo made 70 lamps. Why? Because each menorah has 7 lamps. He made 10 extra ones. 10 times 7 is 70. So there's an incredible question about this. And this question runs through all commentaries on the Torah, what I'm about to say. sometimes we know the answer, sometimes we don't. The question is, when Shlomo learned this parsha, and he learned the words ken asa, was that his what's called asmachta? Was that the reason that he made the 10? Or perhaps he had a different reason why he made the 10 menorahs. And later commentaries, when trying to understand why did Shlomo make 10 extra menorahs, look in the text and say, oh my gosh, look at the words ken asa. Ken equals 70, asa equals Shlomo. And they understand it retroactively. So if you're picking up what I'm saying is it what's called lechatchila, that it's like from the text into reality, or there's a reality that we later see alluded to in the text. And this question can be asked on a multitude of levels, since we don't, now sometimes we'll have the answer, because let's say, I'm not saying about this, but let's say in the book of Kings, it would actually say why he did the 70. There it just says he did it. He did it. That's 3,000 years ago. Sometimes in the Talmud, we have a tradition. We have an unbroken tradition why certain people did certain things, or how to understand certain things in the Torah. Other times, we see the reality, and we then look in the text and see what's called a support for this commentary. It's like what I say here, it's like a chicken and egg kind of question. Sometimes it's this way, sometimes it's that way, sometimes we know, sometimes we don't know. Now, I do want to explain a possible reason that Shlomo made these 70 lamps, really 10 menorahs, each with 70 lamps. And this is connected to many things that Shlomo did. We know from the book of Kings that Shlomo Melech was called the wisest person in the world. And it records that kings and queens and wise people quite literally came from all over the world to Jerusalem to hear the teachings of Shlomo. It's written in the book of Kings, and we take it quite literally. We take it quite literally. We have the same tradition about Avram, that Avram was a world-known figure. And this is before internet, before email, before WhatsApp, but it took a little bit longer, but word would get out about certain people who made a huge effect in the world. So in the book of Kings, it actually tells about how wise Shlomo was. And so I'm just going to read it. It's on at the bottom of page 379. And God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding exceedingly much, and largeness of heart as the sand that is on the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the children of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt. And he was wiser than all men. And then it mentions a number of people. And he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. And it goes on how wise he was. So when Shlomo dedicated the temple in the book of Kings, his speech is recorded. And there's actually two parts to the speech. First, he's addressing God about the Jewish people. And then he addresses God about the nations of the world. And in it, he says that when the nations of the world come to this house of God, and they bring offerings and they pray to you, God listen to their prayers, answer their prayers. So we see from this that Shlomo had a messianic vision. He built the temple, and he meant it as a temple like our tradition about the third temple, which will be called a house of prayer for all peoples. That was his intention that the whole world would come and worship God in the temple in Yerushalayim Yer HaKodesh, in the holy city. And even though he stumbled and he was not able to handle what he thought he would handle, this is the reason why did he marry so many women? It says that he married 1,000 women. Now, it's hard to understand that, but he married women from all over the world. And his intention was to bring everyone under the canopy of the Shekhinah. That was his intent. He in a sense, he failed. He was human, and his human frailties kind of got in the way. But all of this is to explain these 10 extra menorahs, because there's 70 archetypal nations. He wanted to bring the 70 nations into an understanding of the one God. People were visiting him from all over the world. People were coming to the temple. And he, like I said, he had a messianic vision. And like I said, human frailty got in the way. But this is all just to explain a possible understanding of why he introduced 10 menorahs into the temple, whereas in the tabernacle, there was really only one. So this is a very deep understanding. It's a very deep understanding of Shlomo, his vision and his failing in a way. So I see that our time is almost up. And so I think I'm going to stop here, and we'll end with a blessing. We'll end with a blessing that we merit to see the third temple, that will be a house of prayer for all peoples. That this, from the time of Avram Avinu, Avram is a father of many nations, and that all the nations on the earth will be blessed through Avram. So from the time of Avram until Mashiach comes in the building of the third temple, the mission is the same. The task is the same. We can only pray that we merit to see it in our day.